Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Tales from the Inside, a wonderful storytelling show. Please welcome your host for tonight's program, the wonderful, the incredible Angela Sawyer.
Yay! Hi, everyone. It's very nice to talk to you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here on the Comedy Studio webpage or Facebook or wherever it is that you found us. My name's Angela. I'm your host. Tales from the Inside is a storytelling show which has been running pretty much every week through the whole pandemic, which means that at this point it is the weirdest show you have ever seen. It has gotten super wild and out and fractured, and I'm here for it. We're having a good time. Here's what's going to happen. This originally started as a real life show that I used to do in my living room, where I would invite people and I would give each person a theme, and I would tailor the theme to like their personality, and also let them work on whatever they're working on. And we usually would have them tell their story and then say their theme at the end. But sometimes it makes more sense to say the theme at the beginning and so on. The main point of the show is to let people be their real unvarnished selves. A lot of the people who are on the show do comedy or used to. And when you do that, you get to practice like your gestures, and you get to say the same words over and over again. And you get to sort of like practice a lot of parts of it, but that you don't practice just being who you actually are. And I think that's super important. I also think that storytelling, while it is not always like ching jokey, it gets real to real emotions and a whole range of them, and that lets people be the way that people are, which I think is a cool thing. And I think honestly, a story is a very direct way to just like download somebody else's perspective and live through it and see things through their eyes. And I can't think of something more important than that in our country at the moment. So uh, I'm glad you're here is the main thing. And I've also run out of stories. I absolutely ran out of them weeks ago at this point. I thought I had tons, and now that we've been doing this every week, I'm like, oh my god, nothing has happened to me in my entire life. so, uh, so today I am going to talk about the theme that I have for the day. I'm going to tell you up front and break my own rule. I'm going to talk about a time I stabbed danger in the face. I try and actually attempt to do the themes that I hand out to other people, and this is the one everyone hates. So I was like, okay, I'll take the one no one likes and try it out. Nobody likes the stab danger in the face one. So I'm not going to talk about the bravest thing that I ever did, because obviously you can see that I'm a 50-year-old white lady and I've never done anything actually brave ever. Most of my bravery involves like my hair's ability to fight humidity. There's no like serious shit going on. So, uh, but I want to talk about a time that I said fuck you to my boss, and it felt amazing. It was one of the most wonderful things that I ever did before I had a foursome. So it's a great thing. It was a great time. It was a good time. Everyone should try it. Everyone should say fuck off to their job at least a couple times. So, okay. Let's see if I can set the scene. This job started when I was 22, and you've met me now. I'm polite mostly. And when I was 22, I was much more polite and much stupider than I am in front of you today. And I'm already pretty polite and stupid. So, goddamn, that was a difficult person to hang out with. Uh, so, when I was 22, I was living in Lowell, Massachusetts, and I had been going to college in Lowell, Massachusetts, and I was a philosophy major. Sorry, and my department got shut down. They just were like, "Nah, nobody needs philosophy majors," and so they shut down the entire department. And I didn't quite know what to do with myself. I don't have a lot of family or anything like that, so I just stuck around. I basically moved a couple boxes of garbage into the student radio station and kept sneaking into the cafeteria, which was what I had been doing anyway, and didn't leave. I just stayed. And that was not the smartest move in the world. It was fine, but it wasn't. People were worried for me occasionally. And so this guy that I knew Of course, a dude got worried for me. So this guy that I knew who also hung around the radio station, who was not a terrible person, but he sat me down and gave me a real talking to and said that I needed to move into the city and get a job. I needed to move into Boston and get myself a job. And I was like, oh, great. And it hadn't occurred to me to even try to do that. And I didn't know how to go about it at all. And he was like, okay, I'll interview you for where I work, which is nice and a favor, but also not the same favor as I'll get you a job where I work. It was, I'll interview you and see if you're good enough. And I was like, okay. So I made my way on the commuter rail into where he worked, and he turned out to work in this all glass circular building that was in Kendall Square. And right now it's next to a movie theater, but it doesn't matter where it was. It was just this weird fishbowl of a building. And so when he was at work, everyone who walked by the building outside could see straight to where you could like see him doing his job. And it was some sort of radio station. And I had worked at the college station, and I was like, oh, cool, that's a cool thing to do. I like the college radio station. I'll go press buttons at this place. And so we interviewed, and he almost didn't give me the job, but then he relented and gave it to me. And the first day that I showed up for work, like I got on the commuter rail again, which was hard for me to figure out. I didn't have any money. And I walked a really long way to this building, and then got to there. I was very nervous about my interview, so I was like dressed as well as I could possibly figure out how to dress. And I had my weird little like notebook thing with 50 copies of my resume for a job I already got, ostensibly. Very stupid. So I showed up at this place at like 8 a.m. or whatever it was that I was supposed to get there. And there's no one in the building. It's supposed to be my first day. I've interviewed with my friend. He's not there, and neither is anyone else. And the door's wide open. I just waltz in and start wandering around, and there's no one there. And if I had been any smarter or older, I would have been like, fuck this, and left, which is what a normal person would do. But I didn't. I didn't know what to, I was like, oh, I got to be a good girl and behave well. So I just sat down. There were no chairs even. I just sat down in a hallway with my back up against the glass because it was rimmed everywhere by glass, and waited for a couple of hours. And then eventually, through the wide open door, this dude in a really rich person's suit. You know how sometimes when people are so rich, you can like see it in their skin and like smell it from their hair. You know, this guy who was like obviously so insanely wealthy comes breezing through the door, and he sees me and he's like, who the fuck are you? And I was like, I'm supposed to work here. Today's my first day. And I hand him a resume. And he turned out to be the CEO or some high-powered executive of a company that had just bought out the radio station and fired everyone, and they just forgot to tell me. They just forgot to even bother firing me, so I showed up. So the luckiest thing, I suppose, that happened is that he was like, oh, stick around a while. And I was like, sure. You know, I just sat there in the hallway for another 2 hours while he like puttered around. And he gave me a job out of that, mostly because I was willing to just sit there and not say anything and pretend like I wasn't sweating for like 4 hours. So he gave me a job at the new version of the station. And the old version of the station was, it was a radio station where they had played musicals, not a great time, but whatever. And they rented out, the one thing that was cool that they did is they rented out a lot of time to community groups for very little money, so that local people who were into like prison outreach or religious groups or foreign language groups could go on the air for not so much money and just say whatever the hell they wanted. And they were small enough that nobody paid attention to that. They weren't doing a huge service for the world. They weren't saving anybody or anything like that, but they were at least like a local resource for people. And once this company took over, they wanted to rent out all their time at like twice the rates. We just at the beginning of this chat before we got on the air or whatever it is you call what we're doing, we were talking about how housing is so difficult in Boston. It was the same thing all over again. Like big money people bought it out and made it 10 times worse. Thanks. So now they just wanted me to press buttons for people. And a lot of people didn't want anyone in there. Like nobody wants some 22-year-old white girl to show up on their like all Creole yelling session. Like, if you have a like all Indian music on cassette show or something like that, you don't want some weird white college student showing up to be like, this is what you should do next. So mostly I was supposed to go there and then just sit around. And if somebody had a question, I would answer their question, and I would sign my initials to a bunch of pieces of paper that said that the station did not catch on fire. And then I would go home, and I got paid like $4 an hour. It was fine. I worked a lot of overnights. I worked there for a while. At some point, I started working for the place housed two different stations in the same building. One half with glass around was one station, and the other half with glass around was a totally different station owned by totally different people. Why did they do it that way? They were just saving rent, I suppose. So at some point I started working for both sides of the wall. And the place, I know what I just described. If you are somebody who just worked in an office your whole life, which good for you, pay your rent, do what you got to do. That probably sounds like a weird job already. That is not even close to the weirdest job that I've ever had. Most of my weird jobs came for what I did on the other side of the wall. I first got hired to work on the other side of the wall. Granted, it was a radio station, but I got hired to autograph baseballs for a living. I got paid something like $1 a ball to forge the signature of a long gone baseball hero. If you like old baseball, I was this guy named Rico Petrocelli. He was like I don't think he's that famous, but I don't know anything about baseball, so maybe he's famous. He was just like a guy who had been in baseball and now sold used cars on TV, that kind of guy. And people were like, "Oh, that's so weird. Why did you want to dash the dreams of 10-year-old boys on eBay?" And I was like, "Well, because I didn't care that much about 10-year-old boys." And people will sometimes be like, "Oh, how did you learn to write?" Like, "Oh, I learned to write in like 3rd grade. I just wrote Rico Petrocelli on a ball." So I had that job for a while, and then I apparently did a good job. So I started getting other weird jobs with the radio station on the other side of the wall. The second thing that I was hired to do was pretend to be an accountant. The guy who ran the radio station on the other side of the wall, his name was Tom. He did not want me to press, even though he knew my job on the first side of the wall was pressing buttons. He did not want me to get anywhere near any buttons. He ran an all sports radio station, fine. And he specifically hired me to sign baseballs, telling me that was a job he thought I could do well. And I was like, okay. And then he hired me. I found out after I started working there occasionally during the day that he had this habit where he would just lean out of his office and yell at a person who was sitting there doing whatever. And then that person would pick up the phone and they would find out that the boss had told someone, a bill collector, that they were in charge of a department. So I now had this extra job where somebody would yell my name and I would pick up the phone and somebody on the other end would be like, "So where's our money?" And I would be like, "Who are you looking for again?" And they'd be like, "I'm looking for the head of payroll." And I'd be like, "That's me." and then I had to make up a reason why we hadn't paid them their money and hang up the phone. And that is a job that you don't get by applying for it. It just walks into your life. But I saw what other people were doing and I was like, "Oh, I make extra money if I do this. Sure, I'll do this." So the longer I worked for the guy on the other side of the wall, Tom, the sports guy, the weirder the jobs got. And eventually I worked my way up to the point where I was pressing buttons on both sides of the wall. Great. The shows were very strange. There was an all gambling slash boxing show. There was an all fishing lure infomercial show. I got all the shows that the people who like sports didn't want, because they were like, "Do you want this weird thing?" And I was like, "Sure." And I worked really weird hours, and it was perfectly fun. um, having people get super, super like passionately pumped up about fishing lures that someone made as a pyramid scheme and like banging on the table to yell at you about it. That was perfect as a job, very entertaining, perfectly good. So, uh, the more I found out about this the sports radio station, the weirder the tasks got. And at some point, uh, I heard a rumor from the other employees, that two rumors actually. One was that if I didn't cash my check very quickly, it might bounce. So that as soon as I got a check of any size, I should like run to the bank and cash it immediately. Two, that our employer, the guy who was the boss of like 15 or 20 people, couldn't read printed words. And I was like, well, I've never seen him, but that's a weird, everyone hates their boss. Maybe true, maybe not. And then one day, my boss invited me into his office, and he was like, you're doing such a great job. I'm so glad that I hired you, a Jewish lady. And I was like, that's very complimentary. I am sorry to tell you that I am just a horrible waspy lady, but good on you for. And he was very upset. And I was like, well, I'm glad you have good hiring practices. And he was like, I guess I won't fire you. And then he asked me in the middle of that conversation where he was upset with me, he asked me to sit down and read him the paper out loud. So I was like, sure, I can read this. And I read him the front page article. And pretty soon, I had this job where I would go in every day. Maybe I would autograph a couple baseballs. Sometimes I would get asked to pick up the phone and pretend to be the head of payroll or the vice president of something. But mostly what I did was read the paper out loud. And I was like, oh, I could find out if this rumor is true. This guy who, and I heard rumors that so and so's check bounced and so on. And I was like, I should find out if these rumors are true. I should encourage this guy to pay his employees and actually make good on the checks. So when I heard that so and so's check bounced, I would say, like, hey, I'd stop in the middle of the article and be like, hey, don't you think so and so, their check bounced? Maybe we should do something about that. And I tried to keep, like I said, I was 22 and I didn't know how to confront people very well. So I did the best I could to be polite in asking him to do that. And who knows how it went over. Um, but little by little, I got braver and braver. And so pretty soon, I started trying to show him the paper and like misread the line and see if he caught it, or like show him the paper and see if he could read some of it. And I got no answers. Sometimes it seemed like he could read very well, and sometimes it seemed like he was just looking at the pictures and guessing. And because he was someone with a very colorful personality, uh, I couldn't tell which one it was. I never figured it out. But I knew that at some point the day would come when my check would bounce. So I was like, okay, I have this weird position, this very informal position in the company, where a huge part of my job is just to read a guy the paper. And to be very clear, because maybe it occurred to some of you, I don't know. I don't think I was asked to read him the paper as like visual candy. I was a 22-year-old girl and he was a 50-something-year-old man, but I looked exactly like I look now, which is not great. Fine, very happy to be in my skin, but mostly I get hit on by like crazy senior citizens, not by this guy. So I was like, I'm probably not here as like butt candy. I'm actually supposed to be reading the paper. And so I kept reading, and usually what would happen is I would read an article, and if I did a good job, my boss would say, "Oh, that is a story that I can use as an excuse when the bill collectors call. Remember that story." So I worked there for about 2 years, and the day finally came when my paycheck bounced. And I was very angry. There were a lot of weird things about the job and a lot of things that would make people angry, but I had been sort of like just trying to give the benefit of the doubt whenever I could. And I was like, man, if he doesn't pay me, I'm going to be pissed. He knows that I'm super broke. He knows that it won't work. He knows that all of us are just like trying to, like, you don't get paid a lot to press buttons there. So I was like, he knew that we were all really trying to make ends meet. And I was like, I know what he does to people who try to collect money from him. I know how much he lies to them. I watched him get sued by phone companies multiple times and watched a lot of, I learned a lot about how to avoid paying taxes from the guy, I got to tell you. It served me well. He served me well. If you ever want to know how to cheat on your taxes, don't call the government, but call them and tell them, just give them the wrong information. That's the trick. So I knew it was coming, and the day finally came when my check bounced, and I had made a very specific plan, and it was not brilliant, but I was super proud of it. I went into work just like normal, and instead of doing any of the things that I would normally do, signing baseballs, checking to see if bill collectors called, pressing buttons for people, I instead went into his office and sat down on the top of his desk, which technically was on top of a very precarious pile of weird things that were on the top of his desk. So I was in a chair of like newspapers and old food and binders full of God knows what and equipment that seemed like it had been stolen out of the back of a Radio Shack. And I just sat down and waited. And I didn't bring anything with me. I made sure that I like hid my keys in a bush outside, and I just waited. And my boss was not someone who was particularly timely. So some days he would come in at 8 a.m. and some days he would come in at 2 in the afternoon. But the other employees immediately noticed that I was just like sitting on his desk, and they were like, they were afraid to ask me what was going on. And they thought that maybe I had finally found out whether or not our boss could read. and and I was like, no, I just didn't get my check, and I'm mad, and I'm just going to wait here in this annoying place until I get paid. And eventually my boss came in and he was very pissed that I had disturbed his desk. And he was like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, look, I know you don't pay people pretty regularly, but I can't afford to have that happen. So I'm just going to sit here until you give me the cash that is on the check, that is, the 200 and something dollars. And then I'm going to leave and not come back. That's all that's happening. I'm just waiting, and you can just go get it whenever you have a chance. And at first he was like very blustery and he tried to argue with me, and then he walked out of the room for a while, came back, and then tried to get me to read him the paper. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. I'm just going to wait. And left, came back, tried to get me to read him the paper again. And I was like, no, we're not doing any of that. I don't care what's in the paper. I'm just waiting. And then he was like, well, I could just leave and not come back for a week. And I was like, go, that's fine. Do whatever you need to do. And so it took several hours. It took most of the day. But eventually he showed up with cash in hand. And he was like, here's the whole amount. And he was like, I was like, made a very big show of counting it. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to leave and I'm not going to come back. And he called me for a couple of days after that, being like, why aren't you here? Pretending like none of it had happened. But I didn't go back. And that's not, I guess that's the end of that story. It's the first time I've told it, so it's kind of a mess. But I want to tell you, basically, it is the most amazing feeling to, even in a tiny, tiny way, be shitty to your boss. You should do it every chance you get. You should do it every single time. So that is the story of the one time I barely faced danger, and it felt really good. So I encourage you to be a complete weirdo and fuck up your boss's day for no reason. Most of the time, they will just let you come back if you decide you need to do that. Or guess what? You'll figure it out. It won't be that bad. That's my story. So I've got some amazing, amazing storytellers here for you. I'm really excited. We have a really good lineup tonight that I like a whole lot. Your first performer for the evening, she, back when we did things in buildings, she used to run this great show called the Queer Comedy Hour. She has run tons and tons of shows all over Boston. I often see her on Pick a Side Stupid, which is a debate show. It's still going on during quarantine. And she's super sharp, incredibly funny. You're going to love her to death. So please welcome the amazing Chloe Cunha.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Angela. I hope I can live up to that intro. I'm gonna do the same thing that you did, and I'm actually gonna say my theme right up front, just because I think it'll help provide some context. Um, and so okay, well, let me put it this way. This is a story that if you know me, you've probably heard. But I don't actually say it on stage very much, even though it is probably one of the more interesting, like weird things that I've done in my life. So the theme is when a childhood dream came true. And I love movies. I love movies. I've always loved movies since I was a very little kid. I had all these stuffed animals, which, I am actually in my childhood bedroom, which is my current bedroom right now. Isn't that fun? It's cool now. And so this is an example of a stuffed animal that I would have had. Actually, I don't think I had that when I was a kid. I definitely had this one though. Yeah. Yeah, that was before Tiger King made it cool. All right. But yeah, no, I loved movies. I still love movies. I've always loved movies. And when I was a really little kid, I would gather all of my stuffed animals, and I would bring them all down to where we had our TV. And we had like VHS tapes of my favorite movies I had on VHS. So I would put in the VHS tapes with all my stuffed animals around me, and I would have like a little festival, like a little film festival of all my favorite movies. I did this like at least once a year, sometimes multiple times a year, but usually like during the summer vacation. So like that's just an example to show you how much I love movies. I've always loved movies. And so, a dream obviously is to be in a movie and to be a part of movies and movie making and all that stuff. And I had that happen for me in a very fun and memorable way. I will say that so I want to talk about a time where I was a sort of a lead in a movie, but I will say that it's not actually the first time that I've been in a movie. The first time I was interning in college, and I was interning for this super indie film, such that you probably have never heard of it. I don't. It played like a couple film festivals, and it didn't really go anywhere after that. And the director is still doing things, I think, but I'm not sure. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't like talked to her too much recently. But anyway, but the funny thing about that is I wasn't supposed to act in that movie at all. I was just interning and like doing all kinds of odds and ends. Like I'd be the person like fetching the coffee and all that stuff. And just one day on set, they needed an actor. They needed an extra, and I was there. So I was like, okay. And I played a cop. So yikes! Ah, oh no! I know it's bad. I mean, never been a big fan of those. I will say the uniform was fun, which I'm kind of like, ooh, it's so easy to slip into fascism. But well, I personally believe that police and prisons should be abolished. I know that's not everyone's belief, but it's mine. I do think maybe if we keep the stripper cops, that would be fun. So that way they could still like the uniform. But the uniform is fun. Look, that's all I'm saying. Look, I don't know. I just abolish all of it. Keep the stripper cops. Okay. Anyway, just a mild detour, but yeah. but yeah, so that was the first time. I was a very minor role. I think I had like one line because again, I wasn't supposed to act, but they were like, "You'll fit in this uniform." Like, okay. And the first real time I'm I don't I do have an IMDb. It does very little credits on it. I didn't make it. I don't know how to edit it. It's there, but this is a movie. So I had some friends who were filmmakers, locals who were local artists around town in Boston, Somerville, who have since moved to LA, and they're making movies out there. And I knew them through another show, through a live show. They were also the house band, and long story short, they had posted on Facebook like, "Ooh, like we're thinking of doing this vampire movie," and I was like, "That's really cool." And they had specifically said like, "We're inspired by this one French filmmaker from the '70s," and I, being a total dork, was like, "Oh, cool! I love that one French filmmaker from the '70s. If you are thinking of making this film in French, let me know, and I can help with translation or whatever." And they were like, "Well, that would be neat if we had actors who spoke French." And then I was like, well, boy, howdy, let me toss my hat into the ring. Because I've done a smidgen of acting, and they were like, ooh, intriguing. And that was supposed to be a short film. It wound up being a whole movie, but basically they said to me, hey, uh, listen, if you want the role, it is yours. It was supposed to be a short. We're making it a feature. What do you say? Are you down? I was like, yes. And they were like, great. Full disclosure before you say yes. This role requires nudity. Is that okay? And I was like, I'm never going to be a president. Let's do it. So the first day of filming was actually the big climactic scene with all of the nudity and everything. And by the way, this movie is available still to watch. I'm not sure on which platforms because it was on Amazon. Well, I'll tell you later. Anyway, um, but the first day of filming, it was a long day of filming, so long. So I got in there. It was filming at their place, and they had we're filming a couple scenes, but the major one was they were filming this big climactic scene in their basement. No, sorry, I said basement and then pointed above. I meant the thing that's on top, the cellar. That's the one. No, that's still on the bottom.
The attic?
The attic. Thank you, Angela. The attic. Yes, I know words. So it's filming in their attic. And to give some kind of very quick backstory, it's the scene where me and my co-lead, because I was the lead in the movie with another woman, and we were both like love interests to each other, and we have this kind of climactic moment where we have this very like ooh, like erotic kind of like ooh, we're like we love each other kind of moment. And then but it's also the culmination of the like like vampire teeth coming out and everything, and it's this wild amazing scene. It's very cool. And so um I we get there. I got there at 2 p.m. My co-star had some tattoos that the movie is sort of an homage to like 70s movies, where everybody's got have these like kind of weird vintage like old timey dresses. It's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what time it all takes place, but tattoos didn't really match the aesthetic. So like my co-star is like in the in the makeup chair for honestly a really long time while the makeup artist is covering up all of her tattoos. In the meantime, I film another scene, et cetera, et cetera. By the time it was time to film that big scene, it was evening time. I think it was maybe like 6 or 7 p.m. or something like that. It was not late, but it was evening. So we get up there, we start filming. There's this whole moment where I wash her back. It's a great movie. And now the nudity part is happening. And so we have these gowns that were made, these like sheer gowns of fabric basically. And I'm forgetting who had which color, although I should remember. I think mine was blue and hers was like a kind of a pink purple, something like that. And so we have these on. We're like, all right, it's time to get naked. Let's do this. So it's a very small crew. It's an indie movie, but I'm like, I had brought a robe. I was like, I'll put on my robe between takes, like I was some kind of like film star from the 50s or whatever. Like, I'm just gonna go to my trailer. But the fun fact about being naked is that once you get naked, you just kind of get used to it. Um, so I take off all the clothes. I'm like, it's kind of weird. I put on the robe, and then I'm just like, all of a sudden it's just, hey, yeah, why not? Why do we even need clothes? What are clothes? I don't know. Who cares? I'm gonna go join a commune. Um, it is interesting. You get used to it. I saw a lot of naked bodies during that time, and it was fine. Whatever, it's cool. So I'm naked. We're doing our thing. Um, you know, and the big moment happens, right? This is a ritual, right? So this is a vampire ritual part of the whole thing, and in this very important scene, right, we share a passionate kiss, and then like I do the whole like to her, and then she does the whole to me. Both of our teeth. Which, by the way, those the fake fangs are really cool, and they're super. You can get them like anywhere. They're like $20, and they like mold to your teeth. Neat. Anyway, so this is all happening. And the scene looks amazing. Can I tell you one thing? While we're kissing, they're like, all right, here's what's going to happen. We're going to put fake blood, into your mouths. And as you kiss, you need to start letting it trickle down. so, so there's this scene that for anybody looking seems really sexy. For me in the act, fake blood is just corn syrup, you guys. I'm sorry to reveal the magic of movies, but it's just corn syrup. It's just a mouthful of sugar, and there's just tongue and sugar, and it's overwhelming. My co-star is really going for it. Bless her, she's great. And I'm just like, there's so much sugar in my mouth. So I somehow managed to make that look sexy. Maybe, I don't know. You be the judge. It's all happening. And basically, long story short, I don't want to ramble too much. Like I said, I don't really tell this on stage, even though it's kind of a weird, funny thing that's happened that I did once a long time ago. But after the biting into each other and everything, after that, we both kind of like lay down. We're like, it's time to sleep. Not really, but whatever. And then the evil villains come in, and they're like trying to kill us, right? Because they don't, whatever, they're evil, they don't like women. And and this is a fun part of the movie, because remember when I was like, oh, hey, do you need help with translating French? They're like, well, look, if you want to say these lines in French, you should do it. I was like, hell yeah. So it wound up being an important part of the plot, but this is a final moment. It's at this point, it's late. It was probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 a.m. when we got to this point, right? And these guys come in, and I'm just like yelling at them in French, and they did a great job looking spooked, even though they told me after none of them speak French and they had no idea what I was saying. But it's fun. If you ever want to yell at someone in French, I really recommend it. Just go to Google Translate, find some words, and just have at it. So I'm yelling at them in French. By the way, another fun fact about fake blood, it's very sticky because it's just corn syrup. It's just sugar. So we've finished the whole scene. By the time everything is done, it's like 4 a.m. The film, the whole shoot, it was like a over 12-hour day. I think it was 16 hours or something like that. And I am covered in fake blood, just everywhere, because you have a couple takes, and it's flowing down, and it's just sticky. It's sticking to my robe. My robe is like stuck to my skin, and one of the directors was like, let me just drive you home because it'll be easier. And I'm like, do I even need to change? And she's like, nope, you don't need to change. I'm like, I'll just drive you home. And I hopped into the shower immediately. I like took off the robe. I hopped in the shower, for a very long time because corn syrup does not want to come off of your flesh, and and just bathed in it, and that is one of the most glorious moments in my life, and that's what it means to be a star, kids. The movies, glamorous time. So that's the story of how I fulfilled my childhood dream of being in a movie. Maybe not exactly what I would have originally envisaged as a little kid watching with my stuffed animals, but it was a really fun time. And if you're curious, if you want to see that movie, there's a lot of nudity, as I mentioned. Some of it is mine. It's called Blood of the Tribbids, and I don't know how to still see it. It was on Amazon Prime for a while. I think it's on Vimeo still. I don't know. Anyway, that's that. That's my story.
Chloe, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I have questions that I'm dying to ask you.
Say what?
I have questions I'm dying to ask you.
Oh boy, yes. Go ahead.
First question is a vampire nerd question. Was
yes.
the French filmmaker that you guys were interested in paying an homage to, was it Jean Rollin?
It was Jean Rollin.
Yes! I was
I
like,
almost
sex
said it, and then
vampires.
like,
I
no
saw
one
that
knows who
movie.
Jean Rollin is. No one's gonna know.
I love that movie. I love Jean Rollin. Jean Rollin is great. The soundtracks are great. That's a perfect thing to do an homage to. I also want to say, I really like your point about stripper cops. I do think that defund the police means actually get rid of all of them, but stripper cops provide a social service, and that is where the money is supposed to be funneled to. So
I agree.
It's absolutely no problem to have stripper cops. I think that's completely a fine thing to keep having in the world.
Look, I mean, at the very least, it could have a historical quality if the cops are actually abolished. Then people be like, "Oh, okay, I'm learning. This used to be a thing, and now they just take their clothes off."
A stripper cop museum. Why not?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Jeff, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nothing.
I thought you were talking.
No. I thought defund the police was intended to direct resources towards, like mental health and such, which I think would go directly to stripper cops to figure out why they're fucking stripper cops.
Exactly.
There's got to be something deep rooted in them that's like, I need to dress up like authority and then get my cock out. I think, right? I mean, that can't be.
The money's going to making more naked vampire movies.
I think stripper cops only make more mentally healthy people in every direction. So all good.
Yes.
Finally, Chloe, I want to say, as someone who is primarily a fat person and then all of the other things, I'm very proud of you for kissing with corn syrup in your mouth. That's an important skill.
It's hard.
And anyone, like, if you're gonna be a vampire who's fucking, why would you not put your fangs out? What are you doing? That's just, like, use all of your skills, like make everything happen. I'm just saying, good job. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
And your movie's fantastic. I'm very glad that you got to be in it.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so our next performer, I'm very excited to have him. One of the things I really like about storytelling is that some people who do storytelling are like seasoned performers who have been doing comedy a long time, and they have been, learning the ins and outs of telling stories. And then some people are people that I met who I just think are amazing, and they're also good at it, and it's cool. And this guy, I met him because I watched him move. He's great. He's very, very funny, and he's new to me, but not new to the world. And but I literally saw him moving in a Zoom background during quarantine, and then heard him talk, and I was like, God damn, this guy's great. Let's get him on here. He's a charmer. You're gonna love him. Please welcome Jeff McKinnon.
Hey, thank you so much. That's the secret to show business, kids. If you move around enough, you're gonna start collecting spots like Pokemon cards. I feel so unsophisticated listening to you two talk about French vampire directors. And I'm like, like I was on board, and then Angela's like, I'm a huge fan. I was like, I like Cameron Crowe. I don't know. I'm a basic bitch. But I was listening to Chloe's whole thing, thinking like at the end she's like, and that movie was Eyes Wide Shut. And I didn't recognize you without your mask on. But anyways, so as you can tell from my army chic shirt, I like to think I can save anyone, anytime, anywhere. I have a rescue dog, an ACLU membership. My mom's name is Mary. I water ski. I'm practically Jesus. But there have been many times where I thought I could save the day. One of which was today when I, as an asymptomatic fellow, went and got a free coronavirus test and posted it on social media with the location and letting people know it's a free service you can get, thinking this will just be me, spreading the word. Yes, better safe than sorry. What I didn't realize was broadcasting on social media was, hey, have you been in contact with me? I'm getting tested for coronavirus, because I definitely don't have it. So a lot of panic in the last few hours of people wondering if they need to get tested. And yes, I would say just yes. By default, yes. But that's not the story I wanted to share. I wanted to share probably one of my most misguided attempts to save the day. It was the day I decided Occupy Wall Street needs a comedy show. And yeah, people hit the street to say down with capitalism. And I was like, how do I capitalize on this audience? I mean, it was a captive audience of young progressives. I mean, what could go wrong? We want jokes. When do we want them? Now. That's what I pictured in my mind. You guys, everybody out there, Occupy Wall Street, right? The revolution. This is the day, if you remember, that we overthrew capitalist tyranny and stuck it to the wealthy 1% by being voluntarily homeless for a few months. And it was a nice thing to put on a resume when you want to write for BuzzFeed. But to put Occupy Wall Street in context that we can all understand today, there was a time in this country when the wealth and power was concentrated at the top, and an institutionally oppressive system was in place. If you could imagine, just put yourself there. And so I think, the idea of the whole thing was that, the rich, because in Boston, they'd set one up right outside of State Street. So you would think, America's fifth most productive financial center would be, looking down from their ivory towers and being like, well, these encampments are unsightly. I give up. But what happened was they stepped over us many times. I believe their butler put down newspapers, and they weren't quite ready for what I was about to bring, which was raw stand-up comedy. And the protests started in Wall Street in Manhattan, but then it made its way to the Kennedy Greenway. And it was basically like a lot of tarps and kind of like makeshift shelters. Like it kind of looked like a music festival organized by stoned teenagers who remembered the lawn chairs, but not the poles to the tent. And, all they needed was us on that PA, and it was about to be like Rage Against the Machine at the DNC in 04. You know what I'm talking about? It was happening. Jokes were coming. To get the spot, to get it all set up, I emailed the only contact that was listed on the Occupy Boston Facebook page. I hit up, it just said contact the organizer, who surprisingly enough was not organized. And I don't recall his name, but let's just call him Bruce Wayne. And so I sent him an email saying, hey, Bruce Wayne, some local comedians want to come down and entertain in solidarity with the movement. And he replied days later, don't know how it'll work, but you're welcome to try. And I was like, that's a ringing endorsement. This has to happen. So, he's practically begging us to come down and lift the spirits of the movement. And, I thought that what better break from a righteous a demonstration than these comedians, which was all of my comedy brethren I could round up. One Shay Spillane, a young fresh-faced Matt Kona, Dan Bolger, Sean Wilkinson, Jano Zalay, Raj Sivaraman, Ryan Clausen, James Nixon. You know, we all came down to attempt this triumphant show, and we get down there and collectively observe that there was no singular focal point for this show or this group of people, and we were basically eyeballed, as righteously so, as tourists to the movement, and because I could just like smell, like the laundry detergent on our hoodies. They were like, "You haven't been here the whole time. You just came down from your parents' house." But I knew these people were going to adopt our voices, and so with the lineup that I had, if it went well enough, we could line up all kinds of Occupy gigs, work that whole encampment circuit. It was going to be great. But it never occurred to me that I had no good, fuck Wall Street material. Like, all I had was like an opener that was like, "Hey guys, we could really step up this encampment if you just got yourself some corporate sponsors." And they would be like, "Ha, it's hilarious," because it's exactly what we're opposed to. But beyond that, I just had a lot of stuff about how much I sweat, and so when we get down there, I go to find Bruce Wayne, and I found my way to what they called it Weird Street. It was like an area where like everyone kind of looked like they were tailgating at Ozfest, but didn't have tickets for Ozfest. Like it had that sort of a vibe. And like I should have just gone to the students and actual like activists. I don't know what Weird Street was. It was weird. And they sent me over to the library, which was like a tented in area that was filled with, you guessed it, Howard Zinn books. And I was like, this is probably where Bruce Wayne was, because there was something kind of flitting in and out of there like a bat. And so I snagged this guy. He seemed very, like all over the place, as you would be. And I was like, "Hey, Bruce Wayne, I'm Jeff McKinnon. I'm the comedian who emailed you about doing a show here, and we're here. So, where should we set up? I mean, where's the stage? And can we draw on some curtains?" I'm just kidding. It was like that, but I was thinking, we had an exchange, and I believe we had agreed on this date. And so, he looked at me the way that you might expect someone to after they forgot everything they ever knew in the world and had no idea what I was talking about. And he was like, "Oh, right. Yeah, you emailed me a couple weeks ago. I didn't know you actually wanted to do it." I was like, kind of whatever about it. And I haven't checked my email in a few weeks because I haven't been to the library. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, no biggie, Bruce." Again, his signature vote of confidence made me feel like this was definitely going to work. And people were just going to get all riled up and be like, "You know what?" People were going to like come down from the ivory towers and share a Coca-Cola with us. And we were all going to be like united under jokes. But I went back to the other comedians to tell them that, we were going to do it. And they thought that idea was more hilarious than anything they were intending to say. So I was like, all right, well, let's just round up an audience, and that's going to be, simple. After all, like, I had sort of the activist cred. I was once a student leader. I had done those things those kids had done, and I had, I'd been elected student body president of my high school one time, and my campaign posters all had they all said "Rage Again with McKinnon," and they had the Battle for Los Angeles, look of that album, and mixed in with a few choice Simpsons posters, because you gotta get the kids where they're at, and so I knew that they would feel that energy coming off of me. They would have had no idea that I won that election, because people just thought I was funny and hated the idea of a qualified female leader. So it was me. I was the Donald Trump of my high school. I was the one who I didn't come down an escalator. honked a horn in a beat up Jeep Cherokee, but no less, I was a complete jackass in a position of some sort of authority when Alex James actually wanted to do the job and would have done it well. So this is I just knew how to speak their language, to like my senior class. I was like, what do we want? N64. When do we want it? Now. Okay. But anyways, I digress. We had to round up the audience. The way I started with the student group, because I was like, the young kids are going to be way more into it. Turns out the young kids were way more focused on why they were there and had no interest in our jokes at all. I basically barged in and they were looking at me like I was the RA, being like, hey kids, come play Pictionary in the Common. And they were like, we're studying, but yeah, you do you. And then I went back to Weird Street and I recruited a couple of very suspicious people. Their attitude was suspicious towards me. I'm trying to think of what the word is. I want to say reluctant. They were also kind of amused at the idea that we would fail so miserably. So if nothing else, they were coming to see a car crash, figuratively, and whatever, we'll take it. We wound up with a rousing group of 3 to 6 people. Basically what I would call a majority of the roughly 200 people there. And then they were never really there at the same time. Some of them slowed down, enough for me to feel like they were there, but they continued on. Anyways, I got ready to go. We had no PA. We had no bullhorn, so it was pure shout. And I was up for the task, and I was like, hey, everybody, we're about to do a comedy show. If you want to come on over, we got some great comedians. People start pouring out from all sides. I was like, all they needed to know was they had great comedians, and we were steeled against indifference. Don't worry, we played dive bars. We're in for this. So I just see crowds coming out. They're all getting in a line. They're coming around. All the comedians are like, oh, maybe his show will be a success. And they all quickly passed by the stage. There was no stage, and continued to march down the street. And so we walked them before they even entered. And we were like, oh, what's going on? Somebody was like, they raided Oakland. Let's go. And then we marched. there was no show. But anyways, long story short, very long actually. That day, Wall Street was defeated. All forms of institutional oppression abolished. And we went on to be the cast of Impractical Jokers. So, kidding. That encampment was raided 2 months later, and most of those comedians are either doing better than me or quit comedy. So, anyways, guys, it was really fun to be here. Last but not least, Angela, thank you. Will you sign my baseball? That's all I wanted to add.
Absolutely.
All right.
Great job. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I got to tell you,
Yeah.
I don't wish to one-up you, but if there is an asshole white fragility move in regard to Occupy Boston, I definitely pulled it because I went there to DJ. I showed up with like a little car battery and a little amplifier and went to play records for people, and I was super convinced. I ran an experimental music record store, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can find all these like obscure protest records from the 60s and the 70s that people haven't been able to hear, and it'll be like a sense of history with protest, and everybody will be so excited. And those records are mostly records of people yelling. And I showed up when a whole bunch of people were trying to sleep in tents, and they were not into it at all.
Yeah.
And I also discovered that most of the days when Occupy was out, it rained, because it was like, the time of year when it would rain all the time. And so mostly what happened is that records blew away.
Oh, no. Don't worry. The only thing that blew away on our day was our self-esteem. But
yeah, I learned a lot about how stupid I was, and I eventually went back and I was like, oh right, no one likes these terrible folk records, and I just brought Curtis Mayfield instead and tried that, And finally someone came up to me and was like, "We're really glad you're here, but we're trying to sleep." I was like, "Okay, cool, bye, thank you."
Yeah, you're like,
I'll
this
just
isn't
sit.
Coachella, Angela. You have
So,
important business in the
yeah.
morning.
There is one job more of a dick than comedian, and that is DJ. So
You know, but at
that's
least
what
it's
we're going to.
passive. You
So
at least and at least you know.
take requests.
Yeah,
You get dictated the dumb shit that you have to do. We just got to make it up.
It's true. That's true.
You're there to lift their spirits. We're there to like get attention. You know, it's like a much worse thing. I go down there thinking like I'm like the Bob Hope of the Occupy movement. I'm like, just gotta lift the spirits for the troops, and they're all like, yeah, no, bro, not at all. Okay, I know I don't like to be in the fight. Let's just put it that way. But I'll stand on the side and entertain.
I hear you. I thought I was going to start the new USO, and nope. Discovered no. That was fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it. So our next performer, I'm super psyched for. She recently put out an album called Reckless with the Truth. It's on Dead and Mellow. You can find it out there in the world. She's super, super funny. I still have a really vivid memory of the first time I ever saw her perform. I was at the Middle East, and which is not just a bar that exists in Boston. If you're not from here, that might not make sense. So it's a bar in Boston where they had an open mic every week, and I saw her, and she had on this really big scarf, and a lot of the people who came to the Middle East were just like people who happened to be wandering by and wanted a place to sit for a while. And I was like, oh, this nice person seems like they want to have a place to sit. And then she got up, and she was so fucking sharp that I was blown out of my fucking seat. And I'll never forget it. She's fucking so funny. You're going to love her. Please welcome the wonderful Zenobia Del Mar.
Yeah.
Hi guys, it's me. So yeah, we're talking about New York and Boston and all kinds of stuff before we started this. I lived in New York for 15 years. I lived in what I refer to as old New York from 98 to 2011. And at that time, I moved out to LA, and I had never been to LA before, not a day in my life. And I was like, well, I gotta be somewhere. And I had just started comedy, and I was like, well, I guess I'll do comedy in LA. And so I go out there, I moved to LA, and the best way I could describe it is if you've ever been someplace and you're just like, some shit's about to fucking happen. That's the way it felt to me every day in LA. It was the weirdest shit ever. I was doing comedy out in LA, and the Comedy Store, which is just a weird place in and of itself. It's got a really weird history, really dark, lots of just, you know, and it's physically painted black. And a lot of comics would be like, let's go hang out at the store. I'm like, no. I'm like, that's like going to depression, you know, to kick it. I'm like, no, I'm going to go there if I'm working, but no. But there were a couple of things in LA that just struck me. Number one, the shanty towns just like kicking it everywhere was just bizarre to me. There was legit a shanty town next to my Wendy's that was next to the Hollywood Hotel where we used to do comedy. And everybody was just kind of like, and I'm just like, then I went to downtown LA, which is literally Skid Row. I thought Skid Row was just some shit that they made up in Little Shop of Horrors down on Skid Row. You remember that song?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Skid Row was like an actual place. And I went there and it was just like Escape from LA, like come to life. And it was that, it was the fact that there were just certain little things. Like it's supposed to be good feng shui. It's like existentially good if you feed the birds. Not like the pigeons, like the little cute tree birds and like, you know, the sparrows, the turtle doves, the shit that we have here. And when I was in LA, there were no birds. And I remember kind of being like, well, where are the birds? And I was like, well, there really aren't trees, so it makes sense that there aren't birds. Sidebar, I didn't really find birds. I was staying in West Hollywood with a friend of mine. And I was out walking his dog. I didn't see birds, but I saw crows. And as we all know, crows are creepy as fuck. So I didn't see birds, but I saw crows. I was like, okay, that's very Poe novel of you, LA, but whatever the fuck. And then I found out later that those birds weren't even indigenous to LA, that those birds were actually residuals from the fucking Birds, as in the movie The Birds. So these were birds that came from a horror movie that live in LA now. And I'm just like, this is like, it's like a bad freaking joke. Anyway, so all of that, the fact that there was no rain, it was just like weird the whole freaking time. And then Scientology is just like on a different level because it's so secret and just so everywhere that it's kind of like this weird, creepy thing that's just like looming over you. I was couch surfing when I first got to LA, and I was staying right off of Hollywood Boulevard, like right around the corner from whatever used to be the Chinese theater. I don't know what it's called now. It's like the Kodak Theater or some shit. And I was walking, and one of the good things about it and the bad things for me is that I notice everything. So I'm walking, and I'm just walking up, and there's this weird garage thing that's got no signage on it whatsoever. And there are these strange dudes just standing outside, posted up. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Turns out it's one of the many Scientology buildings. And then you're just next to the Scientologist. And the whole time I'm just like, yeah, I don't think I want to be here. So the totality of what I'm saying is that whole move across the world, literally, you know, it felt like, who's the dumb bitch? Palin. I can see Russia from my felt like, it felt like that, where it's like you just moved across the country. And I think there is something to be said about the East Coast and just literally being closer to the rest of the world. Yeah, you know, on that side, you've got Asia to a degree, but there's something better, just fucking better about being over here. So the totality of what I'm saying is, after a while of being there and realizing that, you know, it wasn't just me and this place was weird as fuck, it was a time when I realized I have made a horrible mistake. And then I came back to Boston, and that was the time I realized I made a horrible mistake. Yeah, I'm relatively sure.
Zenobia, thank you. That was fantastic. I appreciate it a lot. I think that's when I met you, right when you came back from LA. I think I saw you like the first mic
Because
you came back to.
was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I grew up in
one of the many places that's just dicey as bejesus now. But
I hear you. I originally grew up in Denver, which you can see my face. You know that I'm not lying about that. And that's
kind of fun.
Denver can be fun. I think that's true. But Denver is has that thing, like the way people who are from Portland, Maine, if they decide to move to a bigger city, they move to Boston. People who are in Denver, if they decide to move to a bigger city, they move to LA. So there's Denver, at least when I was growing up there, I can't say for now, but when I was growing up there was always a small chunk of people who had the vibe of LA, but like juniorified. You know what I'm saying? They had, I don't want to call them LA wannabes, but that's pretty much what I'm calling them. So I just will. And the first time, all I'm trying to say is the first time someone walked up to me and instead of going, hi, went, hey, I was like, what is wrong with you guys?
I don't like this at all. Kill him with fire.
And that is how I figured out that I belonged in Boston, because I was like, I need to be around people who are so angry that they cannot speak at all. That's the people that I need to be near. And so that's where I came, and it's worked out well for me. I like the angry people here. Okay.
Angela,
Yes,
do
please.
you want to go get illegal Pete's downtown?
It's very, I don't know, the way
I
that
live
Boston,
there.
like
It's the-
Boston is the only place. Like today, there was a city council vote about what to do about the budget, and they didn't defund the police the way they should have. And I was like, oh, when I scream at people about this out my window and on Twitter at the same time, they will support me. So I think Boston's a great place. That's the upshot of all that. So I'm very excited. Your final performer, I feel like we're lucky to get her. She's super, super funny. She has an album out called Comedy. She is from the East Coast originally and has spent a lot of time in Chicago and basically travels around the country doing comedy and is fucking amazing. And I've been watching her stuff lately, and I really just liked her and wanted to have her on the show, and she was nice enough to say yes and come here. So I'm very, very excited. You are going to love Rena Calm. Give it up for her.
Real quick, just got a notification that my phone is overheating. So if I sound really bad or I disappear, yep. So
It's okay.
I got
We'll
lighting.
vamp.
It be that way.
Does it sound all right?
It does. I can hear you.
Okay, well then let's just go for it. Zenobia, that was so real. Everything you guys have said is so real. And grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, but I've been touring the country for the last, I don't know. Now I'm just, thanks to dedicating my entire life to stand-up comedy professionally, like a really funny hobo, just homeless. I have no purpose, but I'm in St. Louis. I've been to LA a few times, and I just wanted to say that one of the times I was there, my friend and I, on purpose, it was her idea, but on purpose, we went to one of the Scientology places. And
Just to mess with them.
see, like, I think she wanted to mess with them, and I was kind of like, well, okay. And didn't realize like how fucked up it is there. And like, I think also her reasoning was like hoping we'd see a celebrity, but when we got into the center, realized that Scientology is the like religion that's really built out of LA because it's for the people who can't make it in entertainment. So they need to believe in like a higher power or something. Or people like Tom Cruise that did make it, but still believe in aliens. But there's like a lot of Scientologists that I feel like the only acting job they moved to LA to be an actor, but the only acting job they got was acting in the Scientology explanation videos. And they also had this thing like the Dianet, whatever it is, Dianetics, where they show you the machine and it's basically a mood ring where it reads your temperature and shows a needle for your emotions. And they're showing us the Dianetics machine, and they're saying like, hey, you know, we're an environment for learning. You have any questions, come on in and ask. So after the thing, I was thinking like, that's probably like a mood, like they're making me think of appropriately, because I'm going to get into this. They're saying, think of something that makes you upset. And so I'm like, my dad. And like, it was definitely going off. But then I'm like, I bet if I just like thought of anything, it could react. So I went back to try it. And as soon as I went back to touch the Dianetics machine without the tour guide, we were escorted out by security, like all the way to our cars, like not even just to the gate. Anyway, also, one time in LA, I saw a grown man crying on a lawn next to a guitar, and I'm like, that is the most LA shit I've ever seen. Anyway,
The question is whether before or after guitar.
yeah. I mean, you gotta wonder what art came out of that. He performed it at an Occupy rally and
Yeah, there
turned
we
it
go.
into a vampire movie, and I missed the top of the show. Worked for a bad man.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I will just start his like storytelling doesn't have to be funny. I'll throw in my favorite Boston themed joke that is currently topical and nobody has ever liked. But it's one of my favorites, which is, um, Boston, if you don't know, is widely known for has a solid reputation for being a racist. And I had a joke I was doing for a while that people get away with racism in Boston a lot easier. It flies kind of undetected a lot of the time because in Boston, nobody ever says a hard R. Nobody's ever liked that. Anyway, so I wanted my story theme that I got was when I knew my parents were liars. And I'm not really a storyteller, so I have, I don't know, I guess a couple of examples, but it's hard for me to identify when the first time I knew they were liars is, but I can say that my dad's been lying a lot lately. It's so weird because like he means well, I think, but every time we chat, he keeps saying he's going to send me money. And I haven't asked. I have not asked once. I've never asked, but he knows I lost all my income and life plan and future, and don't have a home. So he keeps telling me when we talk that he's going to send me some money. Like that's his sign off. Instead of I love you, like I'm going to send you some money. And like, it's things like I keep telling him he doesn't have to, but like I put out my comedy special. It's just a YouTube video, not to brag. And I asked for tips or donations. He's like, I'll send you some money for that. And then he didn't. And then it was my birthday, came and passed. He's like, I'll send you some money for your birthday. And he didn't, which I again, don't need it. Like I opened an Etsy shop and he's like, we're going to buy some stuff out of there and I'll send you some money. Okay. And I keep like reassuring him, like it's turned into this weird head game where I'm like, I kind of play along. I never am going to call him on it, but just keep playing along. Like, I feel like he just like needs to feel better about himself by offering. So I just continue to thank him and assure him it's not necessary, but like, why does he keep saying that? I don't understand why the male ego needs so much coddling, the Fabergé egg ain't got shit on the male ego. Again, I don't expect it, would never press it. But if I were to press it, he would only bring up like his problems and why I should feel bad for him. Like that's how it always goes with him. He won't ever like admit how he might be affecting anybody. It's always got to be why we should feel bad for him. So like he votes for Trump. He loves Trump. He thinks Trump is the best president we've ever had. Seriously. But like if you bring up coronavirus, he won't say anything bad about Trump, but he'll expect you to feel bad that he's immunocompromised. Like I don't understand the disconnect. And one thing that's been abundantly clear in the last 4 years is the fact that in general, Trump supporters, as learned from their leader, need at all times to be the victim of every situation. That's why they can't say they understand the need to wear a mask until they get sick themselves. That's why they can't say Black Lives Matter because they don't have Black lives. So they need to feel important, and that's what everything they do is based on. Every Trump supporter I know plays the victim at every opportunity, and my dad's just like that. And I know this isn't funny, but I've kind of been trained that like, I don't know, daddy issues are supposed to be good for comedy. But I guess for me, it's weird because like, I don't really have daddy issues because I don't talk to my dad much. So there's no issue. It's a lot easier. But I guess I thought of this quick example of a time that he was definitely a liar, or I guess more of that like victim mentality. I'm one of the people in my family that talks to my dad. My brother does not. They haven't spoken. My dad's never met his child. And the reason my brother and my dad had a falling out is because My brother we were raised super Jewish. Like anything that wasn't Jewish in our house was considered Christian propaganda. So we grew up in Sharon, if that helps explain it. Like we weren't allowed to do anything that was like the 4th of July or Chex Mix, we'll make our own. You know what I mean? Like anything that wasn't kosher or Jewish was not allowed in our house. And yeah, my brother is a scientist, so he doesn't really believe in religion. And my father came over for the holidays one year just to visit, and my brother and his wife had a Christmas tree. She's Christian, and my father walked in the house and walked up to the Christmas tree and just unplugged the lights and said, "Nobody needs to see that." And my brother's an adult, you know, it's his house, his tree, and they haven't spoken since then. And I'm always trying to like find a way to like move forward, or like it's really hard for me to go home and visit them separately. So it's about me, I guess. I'm the victim. But I was trying to like get to the bottom of it, and I asked my dad, I'm like, "Do you remember doing that? Like, that's kind of not okay." And he says, "I don't remember ever doing that." It's like, well, you did. Nobody would make that up. Kind of an essential part of growing as a person is to be able to admit your own faults. It's really weird, like to even like today, just going through it, thinking about how everyone in my family who supports Trump they've always been the victim, to the point where like they've also all taken a ton of government financial assistance and they vote against it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, is there really much of a difference between being a liar and being a hypocrite? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I remember driving through the last time I was back in Boston. I asked my dad if he could take a quick detour on the way to the airport and swing past Franciscan Children's Hospital, because when I was 12, I had to live there for a few months because of, let's just say, bad parenting. And after we drove away from the hospital, that, you know, I'm kind of coming to grips with all of this, and I was very emotional. My dad, the rest of the way to the airport, just was talking about how hard his life has been and how unfair and how much he got screwed in the divorce and got kicked out of the house. And he never feels bad for never giving my mother a dime for child support or anything. And the fact that the house he got kicked out of was where she raised the 4 of us. But, you know, he's the one that got screwed in that deal. Also, the money he keeps offering me that he never gives, I mean, even if he did give it, it's not his money. It's his, he lives completely off of his wife. So I don't really have an ending for this rant, but I appreciate, I guess my point is, what I'm struggling with is that I'm not even a political person until 2016, or as I call it, when the portal opened. I was never a political person, except for the fact that I'm a woman who talks into microphones. So I guess that's political. But I guess what really has my mind blown is that it's not even about anything political. It's about the fact that there's a difference between right and wrong. And we're being confronted with so many things right now that are a clear example of right versus wrong. And I guess it's hard for me to understand morality anymore at all, because our parents are the ones who teach us the difference between right and wrong. And our parents are the ones, if we have good parents, that teach us that to lie is wrong. So, you know, however many times I discovered my parents were fallible, right now is the moment where it's really just blowing my whole fucking mind that they're watching a man lie every single day and they're all for it. So This is what I do anytime I talk to anybody, by the way. It's a strategy, it's a technique I've developed called dead birding somebody. It's when everybody's having a fine time, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, look, it's a dead bird. And the rest of your day is a little bit more ruined because now you just keep seeing the dead bird. So sorry for dead birding you all, but it has been really nice to, I don't know, connect.
You know what that reminds me of? You were just talking about, basically that your parents are the ones supposedly that teach you basically humanity and morality and all that kind of stuff. I was listening to Cypress Hill the other day, and they had this drop from that old song, All I Wanted Was a Pepsi. I don't know if Angela knows the song that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know that one too.
And like the best part of that song is he goes on this rant. And he's like, I went to your schools. I went to your churches. I did what you told me to do. So if I'm fucked up because I did, because it's a pathology. It's just like between the schools, the parenting, the social community, all the things you get taught. It's like, yeah, but I got this from you. It's like the old thing when the kid gets caught with the drugs. I learned it from you.
Oh, that's real.
Rena, thank you very, very much. I think the ending to your story is that you made it. You made it. Like you're alive. You're doing it. And it's true. I love a fellow dead birder. I'm very proud to have it to be part of your company. I cannot tell. I once tried to begin a date by telling someone that I went to Columbine High School. So, I'm on your team.
I remember my first time in Denver. I visited Columbine, like just to drive past it. And you really Denver's all like, yeah, right, 420, but
not there.
The truth is that whole area of the world is full of people that are like, I'm just gonna sit here with my fucking gun, man.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of that. It's a very weird and hierarchical place. It's a very strange place.
What a world.
Yeah, it's fucked up. But I appreciate that you came here to talk to us and that you would think about that stuff because some people never do. And also,
was my camera on, by the way?
It went out for a while, but it's back. It's okay. It came back. Don't worry. It's all good. I didn't want to interrupt you because I knew that you were saying real things, and
yeah, we could hear you.
It was all. We could hear you, and I was like, it's fine.
It's a miracle that the phone lasted this long. It's probably
exactly. Also, happy Father's Day to everyone with bad dads.
Yeah,
they are so shitty.
I have like the inverse relationship. Like my mom is sort of the way that your dad is. I mean, basically just from, growing up and reflecting on things, my mom is pretty much bipolar. She's bipolar, she's a depressive. It's just one of those things where it's like you become an adult and you're like, oh, well, that's what this is. But she's also one of those people that's just, really manipulative and really, like you said, I'm going to send you that money. It's like they love to keep you on a string. There's some sort of fear that it's kind of like I had a psycho ex-boyfriend that when I had to move out in the middle of the night, he kept all of my stuff and he wouldn't give it back. So it was like, I'll give you your stuff back if you come back this day. And it's like a fetter. One day I was like, you know what? Fuck it. It's just like, you can wear those drawers or, I don't know what you're going to do with lady toiletries, but,
I was saying to my friend the other day, we were talking about parents and just about how, when you're a kid, you don't know that they're fucked up. You just think I must be bad at being a daughter. I must be really messing this up because they just can't seem to stop being upset. And then as an adult with your own responsibility and accountability, you're like, oh, well, I guess thanks for putting me here, but you probably shouldn't have tried.
Yeah.
Poison, right?
I like telling.
I feel like there was a time. And you always, once you get a certain age, you start saying, well, it wasn't always like this in terms of people and the way that people are. And then it's like, no, it was always like this. It absolutely was always like this because unfortunately the pathology of people doesn't fucking change. And
Yeah.
it's like elemental shit that was supposed to go up, like the cognitive learning, the emotional awareness, the kindness, the apathy, that's supposed to go up because we have big brains and thumbs, is just gone. And the other stuff just totally fucking took off, like, sloth and vanity and just, fucking with nature and fucking with each other. And it's just like, well, wait a minute, why can't we do the other thing? And it's just like, yeah, this is the way it's always been. And it's just like, well, why are people at war? It's like, people have always been at war. Why is there racism? You got people in the same family that don't fuck with each other. You want all the races to love all the, I'm like, no, it's just, that's the way people are. And then there's things that I think about, like the fact that war is population control. And I'm like, God damn it. You can smoke and mislead.
I get that mentality, but I think you have to be hopeful, because otherwise you
Yeah.
have to be hopeful that things are going to change, because otherwise you're just like, fuck, there's just constant despair and like nothing is gonna, because I don't know, I get it though. I do think you have to have like that tiny inkling of like, well, otherwise you're just like otherwise it's like just give up, which is kind of a bummer.
Find it where you can.
I
Find it
mean,
where you can. You're allowed to have it wherever you get it.
It's like, it's constant, because it's like you're cognitively aware of how fucked up shit is, but it's like, well, shit, I gotta be in it. I'm in the
You know
fucking
what I think?
Another
think
40
that
years.
Black people that I know have been saying, it's like this is the same conversation over and over again of like, they're kind of spent on hope when you look at like the real history of what's happening. So I think the thing that makes me hopeful is the fact that because so many white people are participating right now in like forcing this change to happen, whatever it is, even if Black people feel like I don't see the point of trying to stay hopeful given what history has taught us all. My white hope tells me maybe we can bust our asses off for free and you guys can benefit off of our labor in this effort. Does that make sense? Like, it's so fucked up to even put it that way, but like that's where I'm coming from, is like, I'll fight my ass off to try to like, I don't know, do my part however I can to like put in work for this,
Yeah. I'll say this. Anytime you're leaving a house in the middle of the night, whether it's because of a shitty dude or not, my house is 63 Robeson, and you're very welcome there.
This was in New York. This was a long, long time ago.
I know,
Yeah,
but
I don't have
I know. I'm just saying, I mean, I'm saying that to all of you, and people out there probably also, because how many people are going to watch
But
this show, really?
Change starts on a local level, and that's like a one
That's right.
concrete thing you can do, is to be like, I'm opening my house.
Change on a local level is in my living room.
Well, I like to think
That's a good
that
slogan.
I am a little bit of a nihilist, but it's like me and my dad talk all the time. He's like one of the smartest, one of the funniest guys I know. And so one of the things we say is, well, you got to do something while you're waiting to die. And that's to say that it's almost like do no harm. I know shit's fucked up. It's kind of like, what are you going to do? I got to be somewhere far removed, because otherwise it's like beyond fucking overload. And it's just like, I just fucking can't. But on a different level, it's not just, a Black Lives Matter thing or this or that thing, because, this is what we're doing now, and that's fine. And I will say, there will be some sort of change only because of how, like you were saying, how big it's gotten. When I saw it jump to London, I was like, okay. And then when I saw it jump to Paris, I was like, wow. And then when I saw it jump to Dublin, and there are no whiter people than the fucking Irish. I'm just right. And it's like the whitest people possible. And when I saw it jump all over the place and all of this stuff that's happening, but I will say that I know what's going to happen on the tail end and in the midst of this. The same way they got the protesters mixed up with the people that were doing the fucked up shit and the cops who started the thing, the same way they mucked that all up together. It's the same way we're mucking up, you know, now it's about pulling down statues and shit, and it's just not about for-profit prisons. And it's not about, well, wait a minute, we just cut all of the funding for, you know, boys and girls clubs. And it's just like, oh, now we're over here doing statues. And it's always very much, that's one thing that I've noticed throughout everything is watch what the other hand is fucking doing. And while they were over here, it's just like on South Park where they had everybody going, while the real shit was going on. It's just like, well, wait a minute. We're over here tearing down statues, but wait a minute. They just found the two bodies of the people that were activists from a long time ago. And this is something that's been happening for like a long time. Just, you know, my people that are activists just literally show up in swamps. It's just like, what you gonna do? And people are talking about freaking statues and I'm just like, that's why I mean, I get it.
To be
I get
fair, I
that
don't
there's
think
going to
the
be
people,
change, but
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think the people tearing down statues are separate from the people who are also saying like no prisons. I think it's all related. I get what you're saying. Like there's like a worry of like, oh, let's not distract things, but it is pretty fucked up that we have Confederate statues like everywhere in this country. Like that's also a thing.
That's the pathology of things. That's what conquistadors have always fucking done. Everywhere around the world, they come and they fuck your shit up. It's just like the Romans. They will come and fuck your women, everything. Literally salt the earth so you could no longer fucking grow shit again and just leave. And you got to fucking worship a statue of these people that did this shit. It's fucked up. It's the way that they are. They did it in Navy, they did it over here. It's like I said, it's the pathology of people. And unfortunately, the fucked up element has stayed and festered. And now it's just that much many more people.
It gets sloppy too, because I mean, there's even like the wrong statues being torn down as people aren't even being educated about it.
I did see that happen with at least one statue of an abolitionist was taken down. It's like, okay, guys.
And it's all like, it all can be distracting, but that's,
I mean, people are angry. I mean, this is gonna happen when people are angry. And I personally, I don't think it's my place to dictate like what people should do with that anger. And I think it's just kind of like, you know, this is what happens when people are angry, and people have a right to be angry. And I don't think necessarily the expression of that anger is bad. In some ways, I think, you know, I don't know. I know that I have pretty radical politics, but I think maybe like shit needs to burn before real change happens, you know? And maybe that's not like pretty to say, but like, you know, reform doesn't work. So I don't know, whatever.
It's also just so overwhelming because everybody's so angry right now about being locked up for, I mean, forget the prison system. Every person in this country has been in a form of like lockdown. I mean, don't even get me started on, the real cause of some of these major problems, like fixing everything. And then meanwhile, everybody's angry coming from this rageful place, confronting all of the shit that's coming to light. We just have the ability to share so much more information now. And then on top of that, it's like the thing that makes me the most nervous is that the also very valid stuff happening right now of this like 5th, 6th, 7th wave of Me Too stuff is that's concerning to me, because it's like that turns into like whataboutism, where it's like if we're not focusing on one thing completely, we do just kind of everything gets thrown up into this rage cloud and stuff doesn't actually get focused on. Like there's so much to be upset about that nobody's like able to pin down any one issue. And I think like the only thing we can do right now is to just stay angry, when we feel angry about these things and not just like, I'm not going to say yes to doing cheap jokes for fucking racists right now. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to be heard, I'm going to say stuff that matters to me, because there's too many people trying to just like get back to normal while everyone's dying. So, I mean, yeah, even like I've been really upset how much everybody's been talking specifically about like men's comedy careers right now. Because what comedy career right now? You know? Anyway.
Well,
So anyway,
people like to live in dumb little self-imposed bubbles. It's just like all of this stuff that's going on, and this is what you're worried about. It's just like this is what you decide to. It's just like what people decide to write jokes about. This is what you see that you're plucking out of the ether that you want to bring to the masses. All right.
okay, so I will say, a thing that I've learned from Zenobia is that you should keep a sandwich in your purse and be high when you can.
I'm gonna do one of those things right now.
Very important.
Give it a
I'm
couple
going
minutes.
to Wegmans after this to get some freaking cheesecake. It's
Nice.
a thing.
There you go.
People are terrible, and we know. And I do want you to keep your rage, focus it wherever you can. And it's true, it's very ugly to get distracted, but all of the things need to change. It's so many things that
Yeah.
your rage is welcome wherever it goes.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but I got enough to go around for prison wardens and comedians. I am happy to blast them both.
Yeah.
So,
Look at all these
All
dead
around.
birds.
right.
It's
Uh,
one of
and I
those
just-
things where you notice that
Oh, by the
people,
way, I just realized we just kept talking. I don't know if people are still listening to us.
One
Well, we
person
have
is.
time,
There
it's
is one
true,
person
but
still
it's okay.
watching.
This was important, and I'm glad that we all got to say something.
Good conversation.
But I want to say I'm really glad that you guys came here to talk to me. It helps me a lot, makes me feel fantastic. And I hope that Wegmans treats Zenobia like the fucking queen that she is.
I don't want to lay
That
down.
Chloe gets to star in a million movies. She's amazing. And Rena, I hope that you get to run the fucking country.
Yeah.
Because you're very
I
sharp.
was born in Israel. I can't. So
Thank you to the Comedy Studio and for whatever the fuck this show is. Like I said at the beginning, it just gets weirder every week. We're here, we're doing it, we're chatting. And who knows what it is, but we're making it happen. So thanks, Eli. Thank you guys all very, very much for being here. I truly appreciate it more than I can tell you. And good night. This was Tales from the Inside.
Ooh, pizza's here.